All right, we got Dan Garner again, and we promise you that this won't be 3 hours. It's going to be 4. Suckers!
14.
I'm going to take you guys out into some deep water. No, we're going to talk about conditioning because we talk a lot about strength, and we've talked a lot about mobility and a bunch of other stuff. But conditioning is huge, and it's something that just isn't talked about maybe enough. And maybe people don't even know some of the strategies that they could have access to that actually are fairly simple,
right?
That could yield some amazing results. So one of the things that you and I worked on that I felt was really effective, and I feel is really effective, which I think is something really simple that someone could follow along with, is just to play around with their speed while they're out on a walk/run or a walk/jog. And they can probably implement this into being on a bike at the gym, using a skier, using a rower, using a treadmill. So you can implement this anywhere. But that's just doing some light surges or doing a fartlek workout. Can you kind of explain what some of those styles of workouts are and maybe what they train?
Sure. Yeah. So you've got basically 4 different kind of runs that you're going to implement. You want to have a long, slow run. You want to have a fartlek run. You want to have a tempo run, and you have interval runs. And they're all done for different purposes, depending on the context of the situation. But I actually really like and almost want to emphasize and point out that you just said walk, slow jog, jog. I think there's a massive overcomplication that can come into the running world that stops people from running. Like in the same way that you can read a 4,000 word article on how to do a bicep curl, you can actually like get into such crazy nitty gritty about certain zones and certain heart rates and certain speeds. What's my stride length? What's my stride frequency? What is like in the beginning, I mean, just like I tell you to get in the gym and strength train, like as you also just get out there and walk, get out there and jog, get out there and play, get out there and see. So like I am going to talk about some things like the 4 different kind of runs that I just mentioned, but in a huge way, like if you have been thinking about running, you have been thinking about jogging and increasing your conditioning, don't be paralyzed by the amount of analysis that can go into something such as getting out there and walking, right? It's one of the most simple things that you can do. And I'm a big proponent of self-perceived effort. That's something that you and I have been talking a lot about, is your intent. Is it a slow jog? Is it a jog? Is it a fast jog? Is it a run? But also, are you hanging out at 4 out of 10 self-perceived speed, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10? I really like that type of terminology because you can imagine somebody say hitting a type of tempo run where they would be kicking around, say 60, 70% of heart rate, something like that, right? But if you have somebody who has maybe joint pain, maybe they are, 100 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, 200 pounds overweight. Like people don't really do that math where if you are even 10 pounds overweight, let's go super, super simple. If you have a lazy day, and you take 5,000 steps, which is a lazy, pretty lazy day, and you're 10 pounds overweight, well, that's 10 pounds times 5,000 steps, which is an extra 50,000 pounds on your spine, ankles, and hips each and every single day. So if I'm saying, yo, you got to get to this zone for this workout, but that comes at the expense of your joint pain, then you're never going to survive the journey. You're going to have your ankle pain, your knee pain, your hip pain, and you're kind of missing the point. The point is for you to enjoy the process and go along through this journey. And as important as anything else, freaking survive the journey so that you can enjoy it and not just kind of cross it off your bucket list. So in terms of, your kind of question revolving around playing with different speeds, Fartlek training. Fartlek is a word, a Swedish word that just means speed play. So you're playing, and if I had to pick for you to do 1 run per week, it would be Fartlek training. I think that provides the most well-rounded benefits in terms of your pacing, in terms of learning your body, in terms of doing what feels right. A Fartlek workout, put very simply, you want to have a background pace of about 6 out of 10 of self-perceived effort. You can consider that also maybe a jog. And then you're going to implement about 1 minute surges for your entire duration, but your surges are done in reps. So I might say, hey, you have a 60-minute fartlek session with 10 surges that are going to be 1 minute each. That would equal 1 surge for every 6 minutes. But I'm not going to write that down. You do the 10 surges whenever you feel like it. So I love that. You get a great indication on how you feel when you're ready to surge, your recovery capacity in between surges. You're not forcing anything. There's so much benefit to be had there to learn about yourself subjectively, but then also performance objectively in that sense as well. So that's a big one that you're going to play with in the world of fartlek training. You can do it that controlled, say 60 minutes with 10 1-minute surges. But if you're just starting and you're just playing around, then you can listen to music and surge during the chorus. It can be something that simple. Yeah. So the course might only be like 10 to 20 seconds. It doesn't have to be 1 minute. And then you might have a minute before the course comes. So you're going to have like a minute of, your jog, and then you're going to have 10 to 20 seconds of the surge, and you can just play like that to any type of thing that you're doing in the beginning. But as you continue to go on in this running journey, I think a more structured approach is required, especially for somebody who has the goal of a marathon.
By the way, what intensity are you looking at for these surges? Because when people think maybe surge, maybe they're thinking sprint. And then if you say sprint for 1 minute, it's like, oh, what? So what do you mean by what intensity? Yeah,
truly sprinting for a minute might be a little difficult. Yeah. So this is basically just going at a higher clip. So you're going to build up that speed, you're going to build up that intensity, but you want to build it up to the point where it feels like you can run it for a minute, because I don't want you to slow down during that process. That's why I think terms of like burst or surge rather than sprint are really important to have, because you're just going to go up in intensity. I would say you're going to move from a 6 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10. And you're gonna have that burst, and then those bursts are in the tank, because maybe in your race there is a hill in your marathon that you're going to need a little burst for, or maybe you want to have a little burst in the tank to get past an opponent on race day. Like you want to have that pass to get the confidence rocking and rolling, or maybe you just want to save a surge in the tank to finish strong when your friends and family are waiting for you, and you can surge that final minute or so. That's extremely rewarding and a very cool way to finish the process. So that surge, regardless of the length of it, go up to like an 8 out of 10 and don't hurt yourself. Like the first time you ever do it, nothing will kick your ass more than you trying to sprint when you're new to this thing. Oh, yeah. Like it'll fuck your feet up very fast. So you're just building yourself up, and you are fartlek speed playing with the process until you get to learn a lot more about your body.
I think it's important for people to kind of ask themselves the question of, when's the last time that you ran? When's the last time that you ran fast? When's the last time that you sprinted? And, if it's been 5 years, if it's been 10 years, that's a long time. And you don't have any idea how your body's going to react to this stimulus, which seems old, but is brand new to you. And also, you might have a completely different body from if you sprinted when you're 15 versus you sprinting when, and you have a pause between 15 and 25, I'm imagining that you're going to be probably built differently when you're 25 versus when you were 15. Maybe you grew some size, maybe you got into lifting, and maybe you're bigger, and maybe you're stronger. But because you're stronger, you would think that you would be more resilient, and you can be, of course, but you probably possess the ability to hurt yourself a lot easier, because now you might be able to produce more force. And so you're more likely, somebody that is not very strong, you just grab somebody out of a coffee shop and say, hey, let's do a sprint down the street. If you pick somebody that just didn't look strong, they're probably not going to get hurt. Yep. But if you picked out like a bodybuilder that's at like a Starbucks or something, you probably run down the street, and they'll probably pull a hamstring.
Yeah, for sure. It's like and same thing with jumping. Like sometimes people, like they start a New Year's fat loss plan. There's plyometrics in it, like plyometrics and sprint intervals. Like there's two things that can beat your ass more. Like there's nothing that can beat you more than those. And there's guys who have longer intervals. Let's say they did plyometric work in football in high school, and then they realize they put on a little bit too much weight by the time they're 40. And they think they can jump, and you can blow your knee out doing a box jump. You absolutely can. Or just playing recreational sports with some lateral movement, and all of a sudden you're down in something that you used to do and you think that you still have that body. Whether it's body fat or it's muscle, it's a very new stimulus all over again that can create a lot of injury risk. It can create a lot of inflammation. And if you're capable of force, like to piggyback on your statement there, it's like shooting a cannon out of a canoe, because you have force output, but you don't have the foundation to be able to sustain that level of force output. You need to actually slowly build yourself up. So you've got a battleship that can shoot any cannon. That is the structural framework and integrity you need to actually be able to survive and thrive within that force output.
I think also too, people might hear like an hour, they might hear 10 sets, do your best to, put your, do your best to put your kind of earmuffs on and just implement whatever you think to be best for you. An hour and doing 10 surges is a lot of work. Maybe for somebody new that's listening, this is, you're going back and forth on a half-hour walk, and you're doing minute faster walk pace. Yep. Like you're walking and you look at your phone and it says you're going 2 miles an hour, and now you're trying to speed up to go 3.5 or 4 miles an hour. You can kind of rev these things up in whatever way that you want, but the whole point is that there is a difference between you going at your kind of slowest, most modest pace and you going at a more aggressive pace.
For sure. Just like, if someone's first going into the gym, they would never just do a clean and jerk. You really need to work on that before you get to that, especially at a heavier weight. But because walking and running are so like just human nature, people just think they can do them. But you really can't. You got to be really careful in this process and really, really just listen to your own body more than you're going to currently listen to David Goggins type of thing. Yeah. Because I absolutely love that guy. I follow him. I think he's incredible. But in a moment of inspiration and motivation, you might want to get frickin' fired up and think, what if? I'm gonna find that dark place and I'm gonna go kill this thing. It might turn around and kill you. Like you might get injured, you might get put out, and then there's no hole or pocket in life you can kind of place that motivation and inspiration into now, because you just tried to do something too soon. So slowly building yourself up with those fartleks, I think, is a great way to get things going. I also think slowly building yourself up with the longer, slower duration stuff too. So like with our fartleks, we are working on the background jogging while recovering at the same time. We're working on developing those bursts so that we can get past opponents, get over hills, finish strong, learn more about our own recovery and ability. But those long, slow, that's just where we're working pure mileage. We're just working aerobic. We're getting aerobic capacity up. We are actually teaching the body to be able to handle that structural work as well. That repeated springing, that repeated running, you're going to have an adaptation over time that's going to be able to handle that a lot better when you're doing long and slow rather than the interval work. So I think if you're just starting out and you don't want to do fartlek, tempo, interval, long and slow, if you think that that's way too much to get things started with, I would definitely, maybe front load the week with a fartlek workout, maybe back load the week with a long and slow run, and then in between, just do what makes you happy. If it's total body strength training, an upper and lower split, whatever it's going to be, I think those two would be the safest to start with.
I think a lot of people don't understand the benefits of a slow run. A slow, like running much slower than you want to run. Yeah, I think maybe that's misunderstood. I don't think people know. Like you might be at like a 12.5 or 13-minute mile pace, which is like almost hard to do. Like, how do I go this slow? Like, doesn't feel great to go that slow. It's kind of almost awkward in a way. And so some people might not understand, but like if your capacity is to run like, let's say a 10.5-minute mile for a couple of miles, which would be pretty good. But you're consistently running 11-minute miles when you go run, you're gonna struggle with adaptation because you're training at a little bit too high of a percentage. Right. So you need to back off so that you can increase your aerobic capacity. Would you agree with that?
100%. And there's a lot of benefits. Like we've talked in previous podcasts about like the increased vascularization, increased capillarization, increasing appetite. If concurrent strength or hypertrophy thing is something that you're interested in. Heart health, there's a lot of benefits that come along with that. But in terms of like getting more into the just the specific running aspect of this, I do think that the structural components of teaching your joints to be able to handle that is important. I also think it's great to learn running technique while you're moving slow, rather than when you're moving fast. So you can work on the technical components of things like you're talking about on Instagram all the time. That's absolutely huge. When you're moving slower, you're saying that it's tough to almost move that slow. I love that because you're going to need some mental toughness in order to keep going with this thing. As we keep stretching out your miles on that long and slow day, if you want to accomplish, you might just start with maybe a 5K as a goal, not a workout. You might want to start with a 5K and then a 10 and then maybe a half marathon and then maybe a full. As that kind of continues to get stretched out, a lot of mentality comes into this because the workouts are long. You're at a point now where some of those long and slow ones, you're out there for a very long time. And would you agree it's as much mental as it is physical?
Yeah, it's a big deal to try to figure out how do I occupy myself for 4+ hours.
Yeah, it's an absolutely huge deal, man. So, I mean, between the technique, between the mental toughness, the structural integrity, and the very fact that your aerobic system does support your anaerobic system. So basically, when you are doing an anaerobic output, let's say in the intervals that we can still get into, and you're doing an anaerobic output, that is a very glycolytic and anaerobic event. So stored ATP, creatine, carbohydrates, they're going to be your preferred fuel source here. Anaerobic conditioning is supported by aerobic conditioning because when you're burning aerobic metabolites to support aerobic ATP production, the aerobic system is what actually increases the rate at which those are replenished. For phosphocreatine, for glycogen to get back into the muscle. The capacity at which your aerobic system is developed will increase the rate at which you recover in between anaerobic bouts. So those two can happen at the same time and support each other. Mm-hmm. So that long and slow, it's not just isolated, it supports all the other things that you're doing as well, including strength and hypertrophy training, which are also anaerobic.
I was going to say, doing a lot of aerobic training is something that a lot of people believe is going to make them lose muscle over time. There's, one of the old examples that people usually bring up is like, oh, look at an endurance runner versus a sprinter. Look at those physiques. But why is it that this aerobic training can be beneficial for athletes that do strength training? Is there a way that they should pay attention to how much aerobic training they do at the intensity that they do aerobic training?
Yeah, you want to actually keep it low and slow. So like to add more intensities, we're talking about self-perceived outputs for Fartlek. And for this one, I'd keep it about 4 out of 10. Mm-hmm. You really want to be going at a slow clip and you got to keep yourself there slow because if you don't have a directed intention towards a specific energy system, then you end up in this weird, gray, muddy world where you're not getting the maximum benefits of the thing that you're supposed to be doing, and you're adapting somewhere in the middle.
Your recovery will be hard.
Yeah.
You'll be sore from your run, and you shouldn't be.
And those other fitness qualities are either trained elsewhere in the week. Like you're actually already targeting those with, say, an interval or a tempo, or definitely with Fartlek. When you have that long and slow approach, then that's something where you've got to keep it super, super slow, and you want to gain the maximum benefits of aerobic only, because anaerobic, or if you want to get even nittier grittier, the alactic, lactic, and aerobic. If you're already training these other two, to muddy this one hurts nobody except for you. So keep it super low intensity and understand that we're doing it in isolation because it's supporting everything else that you're doing.
So how about tempo runs versus, because like when you talk about Fartleks, someone's probably thinking, well, isn't that just doing intervals? Or what's the difference between intervals, tempos, and Fartleks? So what's the difference between those?
Sure. So when you're doing a tempo run, that's basically when you're trying to push your threshold up. So you're kind of essentially dialing in and keeping your race pace, or increasing rather your race pace. So basically when you're running, you are going to run at a certain pace. And if you're running slow, then you're not going to produce a lot of fatigue metabolites. So you're able to maintain this pace because your clearance of fatigue metabolites out of the muscle is very easy for you at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But as you continue to run faster, you're going to continue to produce more and more fatigue metabolites until you reach something known as your threshold. When you have a threshold, you are running at a pace that is equal to your clearance of fatigue buildup. This threshold is really what we're trying to push up in your tempo training. Okay. That's what we want to increase so we can actually increase your race pace without inducing more fatigue, which is something like intervals would do, where our fatigue accumulation rather is outpacing our ability to clear it. So therefore we are going to progressively slow down and slow down and slow down. In terms of a tempo run, that is something that should feel comfortably uncomfortable. Like a 6 to 7 out of 10. That's where you should be hanging out at for a tempo run. Whereas in a fartlek, that's something where you're going to introduce those 8 out of 10 surges. And it makes it different than intervals because your fartlek training, you're jogging the entire time and then having your bursts, which is very sport specific to the event of a half marathon or a marathon. Whereas intervals is hard walk, whereas fartlek is hard jog. That's what really separates the two. And fartlek being speed play and intervals being do what I say, there's a lot more control to the interval world to where we are getting this specific adaptation. I want this to be a very anaerobic bout. And this is going to play in a big way to something known as the principle of speed reserve. So Charlie Francis, he was a speed coach back in the day for Ben Johnson, super famous guy for people in the industry. He was a real pioneer in the world of a lot of this stuff. And he has a principle called the principle of speed reserve. And it basically operates to where if my peak speed is higher than someone else's peak speed, if we're both operating at 70%, I'm still faster than you. But since we're operating at 70%, our fatigue accumulation is the same. So even though I'm moving faster than you, I am not producing more fatigue than you because I have a higher peak speed than you. So it's kind of a sneaky way in which you can gain, like a lot of this stuff, you can see how this kind of all ties together where anaerobic supporting aerobic, aerobic supporting anaerobic, aerobic helping us recover faster from anaerobic bouts, but anaerobic bouts pushing up our peak speed so that our speed reserve is higher than other people's, which allows us to sustain a better race pace for a longer period of time. So we've got our anaerobic pushing type 2 fibers, principle of speed reserve, peak speed output, and a lot of just overall workout efficiency because not a lot of people have time to go for a long and slow several times per week. And in terms of bang for the buck, intervals really smash that. The tempo is increasing our threshold. The fartlek is our speed play, one of my favorite ones that anybody can do to learn their body, but get a good idea and how prepared they are for competition. And then we have our long and slow. That is like the 4 runs where if you're really taking your running seriously, those 4 would all be introduced to give you the most well-rounded approach to your running program.
What's up, Power Project family? It's time to stop dressing like you're a fucking preschooler and step your game up by checking out Vuori clothing. Now, I'm not one to talk. I wear a fucking pink hat that has a dog on it, but at the end of the day, at least my shirt and shorts are popping. So head to Vuori because they have great stuff for your top and your bottom. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, you guys got to head over to vuori.com/power project. That's VUORI.com/power project, and you guys will automatically receive 20% off your order. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes. Let's get back to the podcast.
And by the way, when it does come to tempo runs, is that like a 6 or 7 for the whole duration of the run, or there aren't any periods where you increase speed or slow down, right? It's that speed for the whole run.
Yeah, so there is different ways to do this, different coaches, so you can actually have tempo intervals.
Okay.
So yeah, they're aerobic intervals. It's a weird kind, I know, right? It sounds a little bit weird. People are used to intervals just being high intensity interval training and very anaerobic. But when you control the intensity, you can actually control and do tempo based intervals. It's something I've done a lot for actual athletes in the past in multidisciplinary sports to where you need speed, agility, conditioning, strength, hypertrophy all at the same time, like hockey players, fighters, those kinds of people. I've done intervals for tempos in the past, more so for a recovery workout. That's basically how I've structured my training for my athletes, to where we'll do intervals, tempo intervals, more as active recovery, but something that's going to produce more fatigue is like what I'm doing for Mark, which is that constant tempo pace. You're going to rock and roll with that thing for 30 minutes up to like a max of 45 at the absolute most, because once you are moving at that clip for that long a period of time, it's just you're simply gonna start losing the fatigue management battle.
Gotcha.
Yeah, tempo run is just kind of annoying. Like it's just you like running at like kind of a normal, whatever like a normal good pace would be, and then you just ticking it up just a notch or two above that.
Comfortably uncomfortable.
And you're like, this is like, it starts to nag at you, you know? You're like, all right.
I know, because you either want to slow down or speed up, but you're just comfortably, and that's what it should feel like.
Yeah.
Like that's actually, you're at the threshold. Like you're right there. That's not a very comfortable place to be. Your mind either wants to back off or it wants to actually get after it. But when you're working that clearance, you're doing a lot of things that are going to help you on race day.
What are some of your favorite things to do just on like an Aerodyne bike or like a rower? Because a lot of people have access to those things. What are some of your favorite protocols on some of those things for conditioning?
Yeah, so I really like to incorporate cross training just to move around the stress. If you've got a ton of localized trauma from just only doing running, then that can break down the tissues. It can create inflammation. It can do things that we don't necessarily need in order to continue to drive your systemic work capacity.
Maybe your feet are getting beat up and your calves and stuff. And
right.
now you can just get off your feet and get on a bike or something.
Especially if they're not doing your myofascial stuff. Like your ability to work with the myofascial and improve your recovery, get things released, get them mobile again. A lot of people don't have those tools, let alone have the knowledge to implement those tools. You've put a bunch of stuff out there which can help people, but some people will just still not do it. You know, myself included, by the way. I tried some of his stuff. By the way, the listeners, this is the sentence that I got at Mark's house the other day. Hey, come into my bedroom for a second. I want to show you some tools.
Nice.
That was the sentence that I got.
And you left happy and you left tired.
And
you were spent.
I left happy, I left tired, and I said, okay, let's go.
You went back to your hotel room and slept like a baby.
Yeah,
There
so
we go. Tired him out. Good job, Mark.
Boom. Done.
And right before this podcast, Nsima also goes, hey, drink this. And it's an unmarked...
It's just to loosen you up.
Yeah.
That's all.
Jesus. Yeah, so this is what I got to deal with here. What was the question? I don't even know.
We were just talking about getting on like an Aerodyne bike.
Oh, cross training.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cross training. I like to actually move around the stress just to eliminate any kind of buildup foot, that kind of trauma, that localized area. Because you can keep driving systemic work capacity. We're still aerobic. We're still improving the vascular networks. We're still increasing the conditioning of the heart. Like the heart is a muscle that needs to be conditioned. We can do that with the rower. That's way more joint friendly than running. Like, especially if you're starting this thing out, you guys. Like, if you're inspired by what Mark's doing right now, and this is brand new to you, then we opened this podcast up with this can be tough on your joints. But when you have a stationary bike, or if you have an elliptical, or if you have a rower, or if you have a pool, these are all things that are so joint friendly that you can do to work all of the same systems that we're talking about. So cross training, I actually like to do it either for the purposes of recovery. So you're doing it at like a 3 out of 10. You're just on there, for lack of a better phrase, to get a flushing effect. You're getting loosened up. You're just feeling better from it, right? So you can run it that way. Or if you feel a little bit beat up, but you feel a little bit beat up from a joint perspective, but you actually feel okay systemically, then I would use cross training as a version or vehicle of tempo training. So if you want to use it as a recovery tool, that's great. But if you actually feel internally recovered, but your joints are a little beat up, use the tempo method for them, because I want you to still increase the specificity of your training with your actual time that you get running. And that's what's going to be our fartlek and our long and slow runs.
I was wondering about this. Like, for example, Andrew's doing a lot of grappling and he has friends that are getting ready for competitions too. And I've done some fartlek runs too. But an interesting thing I've found is that exactly what you're saying, going on like an Aerodyne bike and doing intervals, let's say 30 seconds at an 8 out of 10 or whatever, 8 or 9 out of 10 maybe, trying to keep everything nasal, and then rest periods of around 90 seconds, doing that 10 to 12 times, even though during that workout, I will get fatigued. Afterwards, I can come off of that and I'm not beat up I'm not nearly beat up so I can actually go and train the next day. So is something like using those types of tools something that could really be beneficial for grapplers or athletes who are trying to increase conditioning without building up too much joint fatigue?
Yeah, I think for sure. Like nasal breathing is something that's really blown up on the scene in the past 3 to 5 years or so. It's got so many benefits to it that we're still continuing to learn about. Like our nose actually filters the air. It helps us maintain glycogen and be more efficient with utilizing fat as a fuel source. It's keeping our body in a parasympathetic state for longer than it otherwise would have been, because mouth breathing is associated with activating that sympathetic state, which is very fatiguing over time. Nose breathing also helps keep our heart rate lower, and an increased heart rate is associated with exercise-induced fatigue. We've all felt that, and then you're going to be fatigued when that's happening. Nasal breathing stops or slows down all of that from taking place. So we're able to get a major benefit out of it. We're improving our ability to deliver and absorb oxygen because it's coming through a network where we need to be a lot more efficient with it. But I do actually like it for my combat sports athletes too, because it keeps them calmer. I think every athlete needs to be calmer, like a hockey player. If he can get to the bench in between shifts and nasal breathe and calm down, because nobody performs worse than an athlete who's not patient. When you're very sympathetic, you might actually be exploding in the octagon or in the ring or going for a submission that's not there. You weren't patient enough. You didn't get the right position. Or in hockey, you might give away a suicide pass. You're just giving away the puck. These are all very, very sympathetic things. So in combination to the physiological benefits of the nasal breathing, I also just like the psychological component of I'm in control of this thing. I can actually bring back strategy and not act so erratically to this sympathetic response. And I think that thinking about it almost like you're getting on a horse is a cool tool to use. It's something that I learned from the crew over at XPT, and they actually taught me it when I was getting in the ice baths. I've done a lot of cold plunges with them, and the way in which they put it in my mind is like the ice is an absolute stressor, but it's a stressor that you're not going to be able to stop. You will get out of the ice bath if you panic. So the way in which you have to think about it is a horse is sprinting, and you have to see that horse coming and get on the horse and just control it and understand that it's going to be a crazy situation, but you're on it and you're getting control. You're on the horse until you can calm down. That would actually help me a ton in the ice bath, because the people who get out are the ones who panic. They don't understand that that's coming. They don't get on the horse at the right time. They don't meet their breath where it's ready to be met, and they end up panicking and getting out. And I think that happens a lot in sports in terms of patience.
Do you think that athletes, I'm just curious from what you've seen, but do athletes have the ability to build their capacity to maybe be able to do things at like maybe an 8 or 9, but still keep everything through their nose? Or do you think that there's going to be a point where an athlete's just going to have to breathe in that fashion?
You might get different answers from different experts, but the athletes that I've worked with at the outputs that they're at, I would say that at a certain point you are going to breathe through your mouth. I think that is fair to say.
Okay. Maybe you're putting undue stress by. Wouldn't it get to a certain point where, again, it's just a extra stressor, like a cold plunge, like breathing in and out of your nose, but like forcing it while you're trying to sprint uphill?
Yeah.
Might be an extra stressor that your body maybe doesn't need.
Yeah. And I think too, like you might be able to get that 8 or a 9 out of 10 in a controlled environment. So let's say physiologically you can nasal breathe at an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But when you're in the octagon, the psychological component of another person trying to take your head off of your body is a different kind of thing. And I think to self-punish during a fight because of your breathing mechanics, let's just focus on the nasal breathing where we can and take what the defense gives us. We're going to get on the horse. We're going to control that horse, and we're going to breathe when we can. But I wouldn't want to, like athletes are so ritualistic, and there's so much that I want to stay away from. Like you'll see, even in the world of fighting, we'll just stay into that zone. Like when getting into the octagon, you'll see John Jones crawls into the octagon. Anderson Silva, he would open his arms up and allow his back to bounce off of the cage. George St. Pierre would sprint to one end of the octagon and then sprint to the other end. These are all very ritualistic. Holly, she would always go back, jump, step, jump. Like there was very very clear things that these athletes do every time as part of emotional triggers in order to get into a flow state. Their body knows it's time for combat. I don't really like messing with anything during that time frame because it's very ritualistic. And although I may have a science-based answer for it, due to the psychology of performance, I might actually hurt performance in the long run because of it.
Gotcha.
What about intra-workout nutrition? You know, we hear a lot about branched chain amino acids, essential amino acids, hydration, and carbohydrate intake, and these kinds of things. What can these things do for us? And yeah, what's your take on it?
Sure. So basically, there's 4 rules you want to follow during training. Actually, before, during, and after training. You got 4 golden rules. Maintain a readily available flow of glucose. Maintain a readily available flow of amino acids. Get hydrated. And accomplish goals 1, 2, and 3 while minimizing gastrointestinal upset. Because nobody is going to perform well if they have bloating, distension, gas, farts, those kinds of things. Nobody performs well at bloating. So with your glucose, your amino acids, and your hydration, these are all hyper key to maximize performance. So glucose, for example, glucose is going to be an excellent fuel source for muscular output because of muscular glycogen. But a lot of people don't know that blood glucose is also a preferred fuel source for the nervous system. And your muscles are a whole lot like an engine, and the nervous system is like the driver. Doesn't matter how powerful your engine is if there's no driver behind the wheel. The nervous system is what's recruiting those muscle fibers and allowing them to contract with maximum strength and maximum velocity. So I really like a combination of muscle glycogen and blood glucose in order to maximally create both nervous system and muscular performance. On top of that, carbohydrates help uptake electrolytes into the muscle cells faster than they otherwise would have. If you just have water and electrolytes, or if you have water, electrolytes, and carbs help uptake them faster. You'll see in hospitals, they've got something known as Pedialyte. If you are having enough diarrhea and vomiting to the point where you can have severe dehydration to the point of death, they'll actually have a lot of Pedialyte for you, and that contains sugars because it hydrates you faster. So we're going to have carbs for nervous system, muscle system, and to enhance hydration. From an amino acid perspective, there is a lot of different benefits coming from the world of amino acids. Each amino acid can be explained in detail, but a big thing for me is like BCAAs versus EAAs. Your branched chain amino acids, they're really just showing up for work in terms to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. A lot of research on BCAAs stimulating muscle protein synthesis, because they do, but they don't provide the raw materials to actually repair and grow that muscle. So you can imagine it like a construction worker showing up for work, but he didn't actually build any raw materials in order to create and build that project that he's working on. EAAs do provide those raw materials. So you get the leucine, isoleucine, and valine from branched chain amino acids, but then you also get the other amino acids that are responsible for actually repairing muscle tissue. And when you stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but don't provide the amino acids to actually repair it, well, then the only other place they're going to get those amino acids from are other areas of your body. So you can undergo something known as protein redistribution, where it might be like, well, Nsima's quadricep is broken down right now, and he hasn't used his rear delt in a little while. So we're going to redistribute that protein from that area of the body in order to support the repair process here. So if we did an MRI on you, your legs got bigger, but you didn't actually build net muscle. It just redistributed from one area to the other. So BCAAs, they're only a stimulus for muscle protein repair and growth, but they don't provide the raw material. So I do like to hang out more over here in the EAA perspective for stimulus and raw material. But on top of that, glutamine helps uptake electrolytes faster than they otherwise would have been, just like carbohydrates do. Tyrosine is a precursor for dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So we're getting more of a neurochemical effect on top of just the raw materials at play here. We have glycine that's also beneficial towards uptaking electrolytes as well. Taurine, excellent for minimizing cramps. It plays a huge role in electrolyte homeostasis, and taurine, even at doses as low as 1 gram, has been demonstrated to reduce delayed onset muscle soreness in double-blind placebo-controlled trials. So in that intra-workout window, getting the carbs in for all of those reasons, we're getting actual EAAs or even a full protein powder during training for all of the reasons discussed there. In terms of hydration, Well, there's two kind of roads that you could take towards this. The first road simply being electrolytes. So if we had sodium is responsible for muscular contraction, potassium being responsible for muscular relaxation, we're getting contraction effect with sodium, but we're also getting anti-cramping effect from potassium. And then magnesium is what regulates concentrations of sodium, potassium in and out of the cell. So we need all three. And a real easy recommendation to make is a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. Sodium, potassium, magnesium, 100 to 200 milligrams of each in order to get maximum anti-cramping, maximum velocity and contraction efforts, but also the optimal regulation of what those things are doing as well from the magnesium. And we're going to combine that. We still need to make this thing gastrointestinally friendly. So we have to actually make this drink in a drink that is 6 to 8% solution. So that means if we have a 16-ounce water bottle, well, 6 to 8% of that solution, or 8% of that solution, is 40 grams. So that means if we have a 16-ounce water bottle, only 40 grams of stuff, combined amino acids and carbohydrates, can be mixed into that bottle for minimizing gastrointestinal distress. If it's more than 8%, then it actually is not enough water to act as a transporter to get it out of the small intestine. So then you end up with something sitting in your gut. You took a bunch of stuff to enhance your performance and recovery, but it's not getting to where it actually needs to go, which is the muscle tissue. So accomplishing the 4 golden rules of intra-workout nutrition, we're getting EAAs or whole protein. We're getting our carbohydrates. I prefer branched cyclic dextrin or Vitargo. We're getting hydration, which is enough water to make it a 6 to 8% solution with a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of potassium, sodium, and magnesium. And when you set it up in that solution, we did it in a gastrointestinally free way.
When you mentioned the electrolytes, when you see most electrolyte brands, it's more sodium than obviously potassium and magnesium. It's not usually 1-1-1. Right. Why is that? Do you know?
Yeah, we deplete sodium at a faster rate than we do the other electrolytes. So you'll see, that's why actually armpits get white over time in gym shirts, or maybe that's just mine. But if you're a saltier sweater, then you can have whiter armpits in your shirt from salt over time. You'll even see it in gyms, depending on the grossness of the person there. If you go to a bench, and there can actually be salt lining like around that's a salty sweater.
Nice.
So if somebody is a salty sweater, then they can have a 2-to-1 solution or a 3-to-1 solution, because we do deplete more sodium than we do the other. A safe recommendation is 1-to-1-to-1, because a lot of people already have more than enough sodium in their diet. So the 1-to-1-to-1 is kind of a global recommendation I can make. If I do want to be more specific with it, then that's when I'll do something like sweat testing, like we're doing this Friday.
Can the can the solution get too diluted with too much water?
No, it can. I mean, it depends on how much water you add, right?
Because like 24 ounces with that same ratio for a 16-ounce cup or whatever. Yeah.
So your small intestine can uptake about 1 liter or so of water per hour. Okay. So taking that in, that's you're going to be excreting it. So long as it's gastrointestinally friendly, that's like the main goal. You don't want to have too little to where it's too concentrated of a drink, but you also don't want to have too much to where it ends up being gastrointestinally unfriendly again.
The main thing is you don't want it too like sludgy. You don't want to like 100 grams of carbs in this like tiny little thing of water. It's not enough water to get it all to pass through properly.
Yeah, and if you're having too much, the easy way to look at that is you shouldn't weigh more post-workout than you did pre-workout. You do pre and post-workout weigh-in. You don't have to be like very manic about it and do it every single time. But if you are training in the same environment for the same amount of time, like going to grappling for 90 minutes, you get a pretty good estimation on how much fluid you should be consuming.
What do you think this would do for somebody? Like, do you think this is appropriate for like someone doing jujitsu to like drink a drink as you're mentioning, or is this more for someone who's like specifically doing a conditioning workout?
I think that this is for someone doing strength training, hypertrophy training, conditioning, grappling. No matter what athlete I'm working with, I've got 2 goals. I want to maximize performance. I want to maximize recovery. that type of combination is going to maximize performance, more chemically from the neurotransmitter and hormone thing that we talked about, but then also structurally with the supplying the fuel and demand chain of the expenditure that you're involved in. So I'm maximizing performance through those pathways. But when you have good intra-workout nutrition, you're quite literally starting the recovery process before the workout's even over. So regardless of your goal, if the intensity is there, you're going super low intensity, then whatever. But if you're high intensity or if you're fasted, then I do like introducing some nutrition in there to make sure that you're getting what you need.
Around how many carbohydrates? It would probably depend on the size of the person and things like that. But around how many carbs do you recommend?
Typically for females, 25 to 35 is plenty. And typically for males, 35 to 45 is plenty. Those are like very easy, broad recommendations. And then you can kind of work with your body subjectively after that. But if you did want to get technical here, in terms of transporters in the small intestine, there's something known as sodium-dependent glucose transporter 1 in the small intestine.
Oh, yeah. And Nsima and I were talking about that this morning.
Yeah. Your body can uptake 1 gram of glucose per minute. So that is about 60 grams of glucose per hour. So, but further research, you guys are probably talking about glucose transporter 5. That's specific to fruit. Of
course.
Yeah.
Mention that. Yeah.
That's specific to fructose. So that's when you can get it up to 75 grams per hour because it operates through a different transporter. So between glucose and fructose, you can drive that up to 75 grams per hour. But I really don't recommend going over 75 grams per hour because you're exceeding transporter ability.
So actually a question about this too. When an athlete's working out, let's say whether they're lifting or they're grappling, when should they maybe start ingesting that? I would assume like they should have put in a bit of work in the session before they start downing that, whatever that drink is, right?
Yeah. It kind of depends on how soon your pre-workout meal was. So if you ate within an hour of training or 2 hours, there's plenty of circulating glucose and amino acids hanging out in your bloodstream anyway. So you can probably wait before you start drinking your intra-workout shake. But if you haven't eaten, if it's more, I would say within 1 to 2 hours, then you won't need to start it right away. But if you haven't eaten in 2 to 3 hours prior to training, I probably would start drinking it right away, even during the warm-up. But also, I mean, there is kind of a ritualistic component to that too. Like even me, like when I'm having my pre-workout, that is a part of my ritual before I get to the gym and get into a flow. And then even when I'm in the gym, I just like having my intra-workout around. And it's a part of the whole process for me. I personally don't think it matters much so long as everything is still gastrointestinally friendly. If you had a pre-workout meal, those nutrients are hanging around, so you don't need it right away. If you are fasted though, or if your last meal was quite a while ago, let's say you're a 9 to 5er and you ate lunch at noon and you're not going to train till 4:30, then I'd probably start having your intra-workout a lot sooner.
What are the brands that you use? That way we can give people something real specific so they can just go and like get some of the magic sauce that you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I typically hang around with Clean Athlete K. So Clean with a K. Clean Athlete is an excellent brand. Thorn Research is an excellent brand. Designs for Health and Designs for Sport are all excellent brands. All of those products are fantastic.
Carb that you use is, what's that one called?
The Vitargo. Vitargo is a carb that I absolutely love. I've been using Vitargo for a very, very long time for performance, but also for things like weight cuts and that. And there's also a supplement brand called Hostile, operated by Fouad Abiad. He's a retired IFBB pro bodybuilder. His formulations are fantastic. The product, his company is the real deal. So I would add their company to the list of a lot of the stuff I use the most with all my guys.
How do you use liquid carbs for a cut?
For the rehydration and refueling.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got you now.
That's how we get the weight back on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Power Project family, your normal shoes are making you weak. This is why I partner with Vivo Barefoot Shoes, because they have a wide toe box, they're flat, and they're flexible. So with every single step you're taking, if you're taking a 10-minute walk outside, or when you're working out in the gym, your feet are able to do what they're supposed to do in this shoe. They have tons of options for hiking, running, training in the gym, chilling and relaxing, casual shoes for if you're out on a date. You need to check them out. And Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at vivobarefoot.com/powerproject, and you guys will receive 15% off your order automatically. Again, vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
I know there's probably a few people that are focused on building muscle and bodybuilding. And let's not think about the ones who are just at the top level competing, but what is the minimum amount of aerobic cardio that they can get away with per week that would benefit their lifts, ability to gain muscle over time? Like what's the minimum?
3 20-minute sessions per week.
Just 3 20-minute sessions per week?
It does not take a lot. Like people say, I'll never do cardio. It does not take a lot in order to begin to get benefits, especially when you're starting at ground zero. So I would say that would be an absolute minimum. You can do that upon waking with your dog. You can do that post-workout. That low of intensity is not going to create an interference effect with your gains, and it's something I would highly recommend, even if you're in a bulk. That amount of energy expenditure, it's not going to interfere, but it's also going to stimulate your appetite to even support your bulk even further and keep your heart healthy as you continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger depending on your size.
And along with this, kind of an aside, but is there anything that bigger guys should be paying attention to when they maybe look at their resting heart rate, or if they have some type of monitor that's tracking their heart rate while lifting? Is there like a zone that they should be kind of careful with? Because I know a few people that walk around with like a 70 resting heart rate, and I'm just like, you're young. That's kind of, I mean, I think that's kind of high, and you're saying you're fine, but that just seems kind of high.
Yeah, I know. Typically my athletes will operate around in between 40 and 55 with a resting heart rate. I think that should be a good goal to be under 60. I think that would represent a quite sound aerobic base. As you continue to get higher and higher and higher and higher, I would want somebody who's doing strength training to not operate anything really during the set. It's going to get up there.
Yeah.
But I think your heart rate should recover to around 70% or so, because if you start getting into the zone of having a very, very heart rate for the extended period of the workout, a very, very clean argument would be made that you're doing conditioning rather than hypertrophy training. Those are two different things. You're operating for optimal hypertrophy between 75 and 85% intensity of 1 rep max, but you should not be operating at that with your heart rate, because you're simply you're muddying the waters in terms of creating a conditioning effect rather than a true hypertrophic effect. Yeah.
How can some people utilize some of this training, some of this conditioning to just have a better body, just to lose some body fat?
Oh, if you're,
because sometimes it's complicated, right? Because sometimes at first these things just like they make you hungrier.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You start walking a lot more, you get hungrier. You start to run more, you get hungrier.
Yeah, 100%.
But that's only at first.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, the overwhelming thing here is it does come down to caloric intake over time. If you're not managing your calories, it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Your body is not going to be dropping weight if you're eating at maintenance or in a hypercaloric state. So like a weird hack that I actually like people to do is have a protein shake before a meal. It's like one of the easiest things that you can do, and never. Have you guys talked about that before on the podcast?
Yeah, we have. But
okay,
it's
talk about strategies like that all the time.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I know you and I have talked about it, but I do the opposite for weight gain. So if somebody wants to drop some body fat, one of the easiest things they can do is have a scoop of protein prior to the meal, and you're going to eat way less without counting calories. You've increased your protein intake per day, and now you're going to reduce your total calorie intake, which is going to create like that beautiful hypocaloric / recomposition effect. But if you're trying to gain weight, then we can actually kind of do the same thing, but throw it after the meal. So you're going into the meal with maximum appetite, but then still getting in more protein after, which is very easily downable after a meal. So in terms of, dropping body fat and gaining weight, I think that's a super easy thing people can do. But in terms of using cardio in order to continue to drop body fat, since so much of this comes down to purely caloric expenditure, I'm going to have the boring answer of do it when you can get it in. The boring but consistent and effective answer of do it when you can get it in, because consistency beats intensity 10 times out of 10. If there's like a beautiful scientific time that you can get it done, if it's not going to work with your schedule, then it's not worth it. So if you can walk your dog before work, then that's the time that you should do your cardio. If you're already at the gym, then post-workout cardio might make the most sense for you. If you don't like your coworkers and you want to go on a walk during every single lunch, then go on walk during that time. I think that in terms the 24-hour expenditure is going to be the same. So just do it when you can get it in.
When do people just run? Especially if somebody's just trying to get healthier, they're hearing that the intervals, the fartleks, like when do they just like, I'm just going to go jog?
What in what context?
That would be the low and slow day. That would be the real moderate.
Okay, yeah,
because
I keep hearing instructions for low and slow intervals, and then like when to open up, like
time those.
When can I just I just want to go for a run?
Well, I operate in such a I'm very specific, and
that's what I mean. Yeah, when can they be not specific?
It'd be like twice a week that you'd be able just to go on like a real casual slow run, right?
Yeah. I think that you can definitely go on a casual slow one twice per week. If you do strength train concurrently, probably on non-strength training days would be the ideal time to do it. But that would be a very easy and safe thing to do. Okay. But I might not be the right guy for that because I'm very prescriptive. Everything has been at a certain time at a specific time in your weekly split. So that's
I think if you're trying to like incorporate some of what we're sharing today, like I like what you're talking about with just mixing in some of the stuff wherever you can. Mm-hmm. If you feel like just going on a run and you feel like fuck the numbers, I just want to run, I don't want to be attached to anything. Sounds great. Go on. We're talking about trying to like optimize maybe specific things. And so anyone, I hate to discourage somebody from like exercising or from doing something that they like doing. So I think just go and do it sometimes.
I'll actually add to that more value than my bewildered face did before. There's actually a study from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning that me and the boys were just talking about in the gym previously on cardio acceleration training. So they basically had two groups. They had one group do their strength training and then cardio after. And then they had a second group that did strength training and cardio during their rest intervals. And then at the end of the study, group 2 they didn't do strength then conditioning. They did strength and conditioning. They did it both. Group 2 actually ended up getting stronger and dropping more body fat by the end of the study. So it didn't impact their training quality, and they got leaner at the end of it. So in terms of, hey, when's the time I can integrate this? Maybe you already are weightlifting and you're already going, but you've got a family and you've got a job and things are busy, but you take 1 to 2 minute rest periods. Well, then you can incorporate something in those rest periods to get your cardio in. And in a huge way, until you get into a very elite level, it's not going to interfere with what you're doing. And it can even support some of your goals. So like the example of that study can be utilized to concurrently train strength and aerobic work. But there's something known as fatigue motor control as well, to where you can actually operate something and do something technical in a state of fatigue in order to train your nervous system to perform in a state of fatigue. So this could be in rest periods, you're shadow boxing if you're a boxer, or during rest periods, I'm Canadian, so we can do puck handling in between rest periods. You could be doing quick feet drills, footwork. You could be doing whatever it's going to be. Fatigue motor control is a full principle in that world to where you can train your body to remain technical in a state of fatigue, which is really important before you compete, because lots of times when someone finds out they're technically terrible in a state of fatigue, it's during competition where it matters the most. But if you can train your technique while hitting the aerobic system, so you're basically combining cardio acceleration training with fatigue motor control, you are getting your aerobic work in while you're training your nervous system to be effective during fatigue at no longer time than you were going to be at the gym anyways.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about if somebody wants to implement some, let's say intervals, or getting in some anaerobic work to increase that capacity, but let's say that they've done a few workouts and they found like, oh my God, I'm way too sore to work out the next day, or they try to do something the next day and they're way too beat up. What do they need to be trying to pay attention to within those anaerobic conditioning workouts so that they can have better, fatigue management through the week and be able to actually do the other things they need to do during the week?
So when it comes to that kind of soreness, a lot of it's going to come down to sleep quality and nutrition. Now, that's kind of like the first things I'm looking at. If somebody is excessively sore, then I want to look at sleep first. I do want to look at nutrition first, making sure the diet is actually supporting the output. Because if they've got a lot of muscle soreness and beat up, then perhaps that fuel and supply demand chain wasn't even working in their favor to begin with. I think that improving technique to improve overall efficiency would be something to be focused on as well in the slower pace things. For example, if the three of us or the four of us right now were to do 6 hours of ballet, we would be completely fucked up for days. But someone who does ballet can actually do that no problem. Their practices are up to 8 hours long, and they do them several times per week. Efficiency plays a huge role in one's ability to be sore or not sore. So I think enhancing your technique, making sure sleep and nutrition are dialed in. A cool down can actually go a long way here as well. 5 to 10 minutes of really just flushing the system and getting loose afterward can actually help people feel better than rather just going from absolute extreme to absolutely nothing. If it's in the in season, then they can lean on something, perhaps like a cold plunge. Then they could actually utilize that because maximum adaptations aren't something that they're completely interested in at that time. But inflammation is another big component to this. So if somebody is a very sore, there's basically 3 components of joint health that you could attack via nutrition: joint lubrication, joint inflammation, and connective tissue synthesis. Okay? If you can cover those 3 with your nutritional and supplemental approach, then you're basically giving your body mobility from your diet. Your diet plays a huge role in how well or how not well you're going to move. Fish oils play great in the department of joint lubrication. Curcumin or boswellia play great in the department of anti-inflammation for pain management. And then things such as collagen and vitamin C play great in the department of collagen synthesis. So when we're attacking those 3, collagen synthesis improving the integrity of the joint, boswellia and curcumin lowering the pain of that joint, and then our healthy fats increasing the lubrication of that joint, well, now we are less beat up from training in a way that had nothing to do with your sleep, in a way that had nothing to do with your diet, in a way that had nothing to do with your technique either. It was purely these types of nutrients you just had a higher demand for, and you can actually go online. There's something known as the inflammation index, and you can have a look at your diet and see where the total inflammation load is from your diet, which will absolutely have an impact on your C-reactive protein and your erythrocyte sedimentation rate, which are connected to joint pain. So getting that corrected and lowering pain can absolutely be a game changer for someone who's not already involved in that.
Gotcha. And like for something like obviously jiu-jitsu, there's a technique element involved. So when it comes to any of these like conditioning workouts, you need to give yourself a good amount of time to get better at that technique so it's not fatiguing you as much over time, right? So there's like a time allotment, like right in terms of weeks or months or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just getting better at running makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, just same with the bench press, same with the squat, right? There's a lot of those things that
a lot less painful.
Yeah, 100%. Like I did something called Squatober from Aaron Osmus. You squat 6 days a week for the whole month of October. Yeah. Incredible program. It changes the way you view training too. You're getting squatting 6 days a week. It's absolutely fantastic. But you realize how much of it is technique. Holy crap. When you get so efficient in the squat, how much you can improve and how much better you feel in that lift compared to when you're doing it once a week, it is night and day.
Yeah.
Take us on out of here, Andrew.
Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. Head over to powerproject.live for everything podcast related. Links down in the description, as well as podcast show notes. And follow the podcast at MB Power Project on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
Discord's down below. And Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube. And Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Dan, where can people find you?
You can work with me over at rapidhealthreport.com, and you can follow all the stuff I'm putting out at Dan Garner Nutrition, and follow Mark and I's journey and our program involving a lot of the stuff that we talked about today and a whole lot more so that you can kick ass too in this world of strength, hypertrophy, and conditioning work with the Faster in 50 program.
Yeah, we'll be releasing that probably within the next couple of weeks. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.